Well, welcome and thank you for joining us. We also want to thank the NWIRC and the Steel Valley Authority for having us today to present best practices for IT security while working remotely. This is one of 3 seminars that we're going to be doing that are happening Thursdays in May, and we encourage you to attend all 3. So before we get started, we're going to do a little shameless plug about TechWorx. For those of you who don't know about TechWorx, we are a MSP or managed service provider, which means we essentially act as your IT department if you don't have one, or an extension of your IT department if you do. We specialize in 3 main areas: infrastructure, cloud, and security. We work with many organizations in the region, both for-profit and nonprofit, and have a large percentage of our business in the manufacturing space. Today, we're going to have 4 employees with TechWorx here to help with the presentation. I'm Mike Estridge. I'm the marketing manager at TechWorx. I'll be your presenter. We've got Rick Gagnon, who's an account executive. He'll be here to add additional commentary if needed. Guy White is our service manager, who's here to answer any technical questions. And Janelle Schallenberger, who's our account executive, and here's to moderate any questions that people have in the chat. Y'all want to say hi?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody.
All right. So before we begin, I just want to point out you're welcome to ask questions anytime during the presentation. All you have to do is type them in the chat, and Janelle will relay those questions out and make sure that we're getting those answered. If there are questions that we may not get to, we will definitely follow up with you later on an individual basis so that you do get an answer to your question. And with that getting started, let's talk about the best practices for IT security while working remotely. All right, so let me start by saying, unless you had a decent amount of people working remotely prior to the shutdown, this was a complete system shock to everyone involved. You're not only making a technical shift, but a physical and mental and relationship shift all at once without any time to prepare. Personally, I'm still adjusting to the new norm, especially when it comes to homeschooling with the kids. It's just, I wasn't a teacher. I didn't go out for that. So what I want to know, though, is who else is kind of in my boat that they're home, they've got a significant other or children or fur children. So Janelle's going to put up a quick little question. Please reply back of who has a new coworker that is home with them, why they work remotely, and if so, who do you have? And do you have a spouse? Is it a child? Is it both? And we'll go through that. We'll get those answers a little bit later. But while you're answering, let's dive into cybersecurity while working remotely. Okay, to start, let me talk about the most important thing we have to keep in mind while working remotely. Work policies still need to be followed at your home office. This is especially true for IT security policies and procedures. All right, so why is that so important? Right now, we're living in a perfect storm for mistakes to be made and cyber criminals to capitalize and take advantage of that. And trust me, we're seeing a ton of them on our side. You're probably seeing on your side. They're trying hard to get access to your information. There's fake coronavirus update maps that have ransomware sites attached to them. There's phishing emails about account lockouts and payment changes and account changes. There's social engineering with phone calls and emails trying to steal your stimulus checks. This is serious threats to not only you as an employee for your company, but for you personally too. So when we look at understanding risk and being able to protect yourself, that's what we do as a company and what we try to make sure we're going to approach for you here. So let me start by saying we want to make sure you understand how to mitigate risk. When we take on a client or a potential client or do an evaluation for them, we perform a risk analysis of that company, all of their sites, all of their networks, both everything physical and logical that could be an issue. We want to know walking in before we start with them as a new client what there is, so we're not getting blindsided. And you should actually apply the same approach for your home. This is not an area that you're used to working, and especially if you have young kids or pets, working remotely from home and having that there. So the IT environment is totally different, and you want to make sure that you are analyzing that as best you can. It's important to know all the risks so that you didn't have to worry about before while you're in the office. So Janelle, hey, what were those results that we got as far as significant others or fur children or kids that are at home?
I didn't see any results yet, but I can say that I personally have a significant other, 16-year-old, 2 dogs, 2 ducks, and 12 chickens that keep me company during the day.
Nice.
I try to keep the chickens from pecking at the keyboard,
That's important. So my house is actually more of a ticking time bomb than Janelle's. Let me tell you a little bit about my house. So I've got a 5-year-old daughter who's very curious about using the computer, and I find her coming up and asking me, what does this button do? What does that button do? I've got a 9-year-old who's always on the internet. He wants to be playing Fortnite with his friends and getting out there and being social with some chats. And then my wife's a veterinarian, so we've got pets. I've got a cat that thinks my keyboard is the most comfortable place to sleep in the entire house, which is great for the cat, bad for me. So when you're at your work office, you should have been having some requirements in place. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the cat being on my keyboard. You're required to lock your computer when you walk away to prevent unauthorized access to data. You're making sure no one's seeing if you have some financials up or things like that, that they are not being shared with everyone in the organization. Well, your new coworkers or unauthorized users at home, the significant others, cats, kids, roommates, you don't want them getting access to that information either. Or even worse, if you got up for lunch and then left the company financials up on your computer, that's the perfect time for a child or a pet to accidentally change a spreadsheet number without even realizing it, and then you send it off and there's all these errors. Also, a lot of things you need to think about at being home is, that physical security is, okay, at the office, you could close your office door, don't have access to your equipment. At home, you may not have an office that you're able to access, or you may be in a common area. So you want to make sure you put away any of your work equipment so you don't have any accidental spills. Let's talk about some other areas that you may not have thought of while working remotely. So your internet connection at home is most likely wireless, like mine. And if so, it should be password protected. If it's not, please make sure it does. But when you're looking at your internet, you want to make sure you identify who else is on that wireless network. Do you have a spouse that's also working from home? Do you have kids that are on that? And if you can, and most wireless access points allow you to do this now, you want to segment that signal. Create a separate signal for the kids and the spouse and assign bandwidth to that. That way, you're not getting your Teams meeting freezing up because your son's playing Fortnite. And if you're sharing a computer from home, because not everyone actually has a work computer or laptop that they can take back, sometimes they're using a personal computer to access work, look at how you can actually protect that personal computer and protect your work computer at the same time if you're remoting in. So make sure all your software is up to date, that you're running antivirus on the computer, create a separate work profile so you have access to information and only do access for work stuff on that profile. Don't mix your personal profile with your work profile. Most Windows 10 computers will allow you to create additional profiles on there. If possible, keep yourself from checking personal email on the work computer or grocery shopping on it or Amazon shopping. I know this is kind of a gray area for a lot of people. I find myself guilty of that every once in a while. Don't tell the boss. But it's something that you want to make sure that you're not putting yourself or your company at risk. There are things that when you're checking those, you're creating an opportunity for an error to happen or something to get out, that you're mixing those work and personal life. Also, if you have kids that are accessing school information, please make sure you're keeping that information secure as well. Have a separate profile for each child. Make sure that that data is secure, their passwords are secure. School data and children's data is very, very highly desirable on the secondary black market. You know, criminals, that's data that could last for a lifetime if they get access to it. So you want to make sure you're protecting your kids on that part. Now, Janelle, let's put up another question here. So on the computer side, are you using your personal computer to access work information, or do you have a work computer when you're working remotely? Just out of curiosity. We'll get those results in a little bit. So I'm going to stop right here for a second. Do we have any questions that have popped up?
No, we don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay. All right. Reminder, if you have any questions during the presentation, we'll do some Q&A afterwards. Please feel free to put them in chat. We'll make sure we get those answered, and someone else might have that same question. So let's talk passwords for a second. So you want to make sure that you have a good password, and a good password is something that you can remember. Those small, complex passwords that have a lot of different characters, you want to make sure that you have something that is a little longer in characters, and a passphrase actually works a little better than using @ exclamation points throughout the entire thing trying to spell random words. So a passphrase of "I love chocolate chip cookies" is stronger than an 8-character one with random symbols in it that you may forget. Another key thing with passwords. So I know we all have different accounts that we log into, work, personal, and social media. You want to keep these things separate. The reason being is that if you have a password that you use all the time, and you're using it on your work, you're using it on your personal email, you're using it on your finances, you're using it on social media, you're doing it when you randomly buy something off a website, and it's that same password. Well, if that password gets compromised, then all of a sudden they've got access to everything. So make sure you are segmenting your passwords based off of your work, your personal, your financial. Have some the random site ones, have some throwaway passwords. Hey, you figure out that password is, great. I don't care about that one, but keep those financial ones, the personal email ones, the work ones locked down, and make sure you have different passwords for different segments. When we talk about advanced security, some things to think about is multi-factor authentication. Now, you may not be familiar with this term, but you should be familiar once I describe it. So most everyone already uses multi-factor authentication when you log in a bank account. So you get your bank, you put in your username and password, and then what happens? You get a text message that has a 6-digit code, and you go and put in that 6-digit code and authenticates it. Well, that first username and password is the first form of authentication. That second, where it's going to a device, is a second authentication because that device is tied to you. And so that gives you your multi-factor, your first factor and your second factor authentication. If your organization hasn't rolled this out for anyone who's working remotely, they really should. It also gives the benefit of like single sign-on, so you don't have to always remember all these passwords. It'll single sign on everything for you with that authentication. It's also MFA, as it's also known in the tech world. It's easy to implement, it's inexpensive, and it provides a high level of security. It's also available with your Microsoft 365 account or your Google Cloud. So there's many ways to get that for you. All right, data and email encryption. So if you're sending emails from your remote place, whether that is you're in a hotel room, you're at home, wherever that is, and it is data that is financial data or sensitive data, you want to make sure you encrypt that email. If you don't know how to encrypt an email, ask a coworker who does, or ask your IT department or IT vendor to show you how to send an encrypted email. I think it's very important for you to understand how to do that because it's going to allow you to send secure information and feel confident that it's going to reach destination securely as well. Now, the last part is for advanced security is DNS website filters. So many of you might already have something like this in your office setting. There are cloud versions that allow you to have it wherever you roam. So no matter where you're at and connecting to the internet, it's protecting the websites that are malicious, keeping you from going to those. So let me give you an example of kind of a love-hate relationship with it. Yes, you may not be able to get to Amazon or eBay or Facebook because of your policies and procedures that your company has in place for IT. But at the same time, this protects you against redirects where you think you're going to the right link and it redirects you to something else that's malicious. That could be a ransomware and could just wipe out your entire computer, wipe out your entire network. So it's very important that if you don't have this type of software, that you look into it. Again, it's relatively inexpensive. There are multiple softwares that are out there that you can utilize that do this DNS protection. Now, I talked earlier about one of the most important things is policy and procedures. If I was going to pick, the second most important thing is backups, because if you're working remotely, you don't want to take the chance of having your data leave. It could disappear, something could happen to your device. There are things that you want to make sure that your data is backed up. Now, a good, reliable backup is also something that you need to have if you're in the cloud. Just because it is cloud and if you have a third-party cloud backup, that'll actually give you some transparency in that backup solution. So I want to talk about an example of how critical having good backups are. So we were performing a free assessment audit for a prospect a few years back. We initially thought they had a great backup when we were taking over from the previous IT provider. Turns out they didn't. So they had a physical device backing up their server, and that pushed encrypted backups to the cloud. Awesome, right? Well, when we were auditing their backup, we noticed that the backup unit was full and had failed to push backups to the cloud for about 7 months. And no one had bothered to check if it was working on a consistent basis. And if we hadn't come in for that assessment for that prospect, who's now a client, they would have lost 7 months of data or more if something happened to their system. And that's scary. So I want to make sure that you have a clear knowledge of backups and backups are working or not. If your employer is using a cloud application like Microsoft 365, knowing a backup is working is not always clear. The last thing you want to find out is a setting was off and the backup didn't work. And this is why I said that third-party cloud backup is a great solution that gives you redundancy and then transparency that you need to make sure your data backup is happening on a regular basis. It also keeps you from having all your eggs in one basket. Now, this doesn't have to be expensive. Let me give you an example. So Barracuda Spam Filter, which is a product that's out there, we happen to resell it, but it gives you a cloud-to-cloud backup for Microsoft 365 data. It's simple to use, it's inexpensive, it's easy to use, and crystal clear if a backup occurred. If you rely on other cloud applications to run your business, so that's like a cloud ERP system or things like that, another thing you want to make sure you do is do your due diligence, ask them how they back up their cloud data so that you're making sure your data in the cloud is protected, even though it's in their system. If you don't like their backup solution that they're telling you about, ask if they have a third-party data backup solution that is available. It may be worth a little extra a month just for that peace of mind. Now, if you don't have cloud applications and you need a physical backup solution for your employees or yourself, use an external hard drive versus a USB flash drive. They're more reliable and less likely to fail than a USB flash drive. Another thing to make sure, because going back to not all your eggs in one basket, you'll want to have more than one drive to rotate those backups just to make sure in case something happens to that one physical drive. So one last thing I want to really hit home with backups. With any backup solution you use, there are steps you want to take to ensure everything is working properly, kind of back to that example I talked about. So you want to set a backup solution that automatically backs up for you and keeps you from having to remember to do it every day. It kind of keeps the human error out of this thing. So when you do that, though, you can't just set it and forget it. You have to check that the backups worked and set a schedule that could be daily, that could be weekly, that could be bi-weekly, to make sure they are actually happening and the data is going where it needs to go and your device isn't full. And so the last thing you want to find out, though, is that backup didn't work, especially when you need it. This brings up to a final critical point on backups and checking backups. So not only do you want to check to make sure did they work when you set them up, they're functioning properly, but you actually want to schedule like on a monthly or quarterly basis to test your backups. Coordinate with your IT department or your IT provider to actually delete a file. Now, nothing critical. Please don't delete anything critical, but create some test files, use those as what you're going to delete, and then test your backup to see, did it actually work? Could we recover that file? Any questions on backups at all, Janelle?
No questions from the attendees at this time.
Okay. And then what's our...
I apologize, we do have one. If we are working remotely, accessing the business's network remotely, is our work backed up as usual? Example, the cloud.
All right, I'm going to defer to Guy, our technical.
Well, that depends on what we're talking about working with. If we're talking about actually working with documents in the cloud, then as long as they have a cloud backup in place, yes. Now, it can get a little tricky because sometimes, again, in this new paradigm, people don't realize where they're saving things. That's where it can get a little off track, because if you're working from your home computer and you're saving to your home computer, then most likely they're not being backed up. So that's why you want to be very cognizant of where you're storing your data. So in that respect, you got to take a look at your procedure at home. So make sure in those circumstances where you're worried about it, as long as you're saving to where you would if you were in the office, and there's a backup strategy in place there, then yes, you should be covered. Whereas if you make a mistake and you save it to your home computer, probably not gonna be covered.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions on backup?
No, I don't see any other questions.
Okay, great. Okay, let's talk about cloud tools for a second. So we highly recommend anyone who is having to work remotely to leverage the cloud services. There are a lot of cloud-based collaboration tools for sharing. There's a lot of third-party storage that's out there. But when you're doing this, you want to make sure that any third-party storage or collaboration tools in the cloud meet within the regulations that you're under. So if you have to meet NIST or DFARS or SOX or PCI or HIPAA or some other regulation, you want to make sure this is approved and everything is going through your company, that they're saying this is a great tool to use, so that you're not causing an issue later on where you're using a tool that would make you out of that compliance. Some examples of some good data sharing and collaboration. So Teams and SharePoint, they come with your Microsoft 365 account, Google Drive, and there's Dropbox as well. Now, be careful on this. It's important that you're not just using the free accounts. You may want to look at your organization and talk to them about, there are enterprise level accounts that can be monitored by everyone. You can get to see what the data transfer is. That way you don't have anyone kind of going with, some rogue IT on their own, sharing files that they shouldn't. So again, please work with your IT department or IT provider if you're looking at cloud services and implementing those cloud services, to make sure that they fit within your needs and the regulations that you might have to be under. And again, please don't just go on your own and set up a Dropbox. You don't want to be the one who gave out the trade secrets or other valuable data because you unknowingly shared it with someone who you shouldn't have. So please, make sure you're talking to your company about that. Another big thing with working remotely is cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is always critical, but right now it is the most critical. I'm going to have Janelle, before we get into hitting home on the cybersecurity, want you to give me one last little question out there, see if we can get an answer on this. Is who has received a phishing email at work or home or both? And are you noticing an increase since COVID hit in this? So on our end, as an IT company, we've been seeing a huge increase, over 400% since COVID began. And we're seeing these fake websites out there with IRS stimulus checks, census information. We're seeing phishing emails with IRS returns and stimulus check updates. But Netflix, Disney fake account password resets, they're trying to get people who are working from home. Oh, geez, my Netflix isn't working. What are the kids going to do? I got to change that. All of a sudden, they've got your credentials. They're sending out fake accounts to lock out Microsoft and Google. You got to be careful. You got to be careful on some of that. Fake bank and credit card emails. Just be very cognizant. Make sure you know who that sender is before you open that or open up a link. So when you're looking at trying to find cybersecurity training, there's a lot out there right now. There's webinars, there's recorded trainings. When you look at some of the organizations you belong to, so I just popped up the NWIRC training, and there's a ton of trainings that are out there. A lot of people are pushing up trainings for remote workers so that you can be safe at home, you can be productive at home. But again, on the cybersecurity side, make sure that you are looking to stay up to date on what the most threats are. You want to make sure, if you're a manager or owner, that you're also encouraging your employees to take these trainings so that they're aware of the different threats. And especially when this comes down to social engineering, phishing, and email security. You've got a remote team that's out there that, in the office, you could just knock, hey, can you come look at this email? It kind of seems a little weird. Should I open it? Should I not? Well, you may not have that luxury when you're working remotely. And so you got to be aware of what that is going to happen and look like. So let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So here is a social engineering spoofing example. So I was on a board with Greg. Greg's a great guy. Love the Seawolves. I got this email that looked like it was from Greg. And before I got into IT, I was actually a banker. And so it was something that came out that said, hey, can you send me this check for $3,650 today? And I was like, whoa, this is kind of odd coming from Greg. Well, it wasn't his banker. So let me look into this a little more. Well, when I went to hit reply, because I was kind of curious, Greg's email disappeared. It was no longer coming from gcoleman@seawolves.com. It was actually coming from CEO00121@gmail.com. So they had masked that email to look like it was coming from Greg. So if I hadn't done my due diligence, I just replied back, yeah, sure, I'll get that taken care of. Where do you want me to send that? And they said, well, here, wire it to this. Okay, great. Well, then that money's gone. So be very, very careful about those email addresses. Now, they also, you would probably catch this one, but they're also playing on emotion too. And so a good friend of mine is down in Pittsburgh, and I got her to send me a copy of the email that she received. So she received this phishing email. And this email, if you clicked on that link, it went to a ransomware site. And so my friend Joy, and so it's addressed to Joy in the email there, got this email saying, here are your divorce papers. Now, when you see divorce papers, the first thing goes in your mind, emotion takes over before logic. And so when she got these, she was like, oh, I thought things were good. We should be fine. Pens are winning. We went on a date last week. Everything seems good. So she was about 2 seconds from clicking. She stopped herself, sent it to our IT department. Our IT department said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Good thing you didn't. That will lock down the entire company. So be very, very careful. They're not only playing on getting your account information, they're trying to play on emotion to get you to respond. So we've covered a lot in a short period of time. I just want to make sure that everyone is staying safe and secure, that they're keeping up with where they need to be with IT, and that you're embracing some of the changes that are coming at you. There's a lot of technology that you may not have used previously that now you're touching and using and on a daily basis. When we come out of this, figure out how you can leverage this for your remote workforce, for yourself as well, and make sure that you're staying safe with everything. So let's go in and see if we have any questions. And we covered a lot today. Any questions out there with working remotely and staying secure, or anything?
We don't have any new questions at this point. I just put the announcement out to see if we have any. So maybe we'll give people a second to respond.
Sounds perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any pop up. Are you?
Nope, I don't think we have any at this point, but if anybody does have any questions, would you like to share our info in case they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, why don't you toss in the chat our email address for there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to be sending out a recording for you, so you get a recording of this, as well as the checklist for you personally to make sure you're staying safe and secure and when you're at home. So it's kind of like that full analysis for you for working remotely. And then we are offering for any of your companies a free assessment for security. So please take advantage of that. And that'll be sent out by the NWIRC to get in touch with us. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions or things pop up. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for attending. We hope to see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.